All right, our technical session for this afternoon is T-47. We're going to be talking about securing a SOHO or small office, home office, wireless and wired network. Our objectives for this particular session are going to be to explain the value of going the extra effort to protect the data on a SOHO network. The beautiful part is many of you can now adopt this stuff in your houses. You'll be able to describe the strategies for securing both a wired and wireless SOHO network and describe the unique strategies for securing a wireless SOHO network. BSMs we're going to need to keep in mind while we're working through this particular technical session. Adaptability, being able to change to the ever-evolving threats that are working on our networks, and persistence, continuing to work towards those solutions even after you have to work or hand it off to someone else. I imagine they will be prone to viruses. And don't forget, though, we are actually on the cusp of quantum computing too. So that is something else that we have to bear in mind. That actually is a threat to blockchain. So fun article I read on that one. I'll try to find that one for you, Avery. All right, importance of protecting SOHO routers, whether you're using a wired or wireless one. If you don't go the extra steps to actually configure these things properly, they can pose, I would say, more than potential security risk. I would say it is almost a guaranteed security risk. For the most part, the days of being in an apartment complex and over half the networks of the people around you were just widely open and unlocked, where you could just kind of log into whatever one had the best reception at the time. Most people are starting to actually take some extra steps to secure their networks, at least to a light degree. If your network itself is not secured or it's open, an intruder can easily gain access to your systems, to your internal network, as well as use your connection as a conduit to the internet without your consent. Once the intruder has access to your network, they can use it for a variety of operations, such as to steal your internet bandwidth. If they're going to sail the high seas and look for those videos that are still in theaters, they likely would like to use an IP address that is not their own. So they may log into your network and use your network to do the unsavory things that they don't want attributed to their network. They can perform disruptive acts like shutting down your systems, causing havoc in your internal networks, things like that. They can steal sensitive information from a SOHO perspective. This could be your credit card numbers, personally identifiable information, health information, things like that. And we want to try to keep that, to a minimum. I understand our identity is stolen on average about 4 times a year, but let's not easily give them a fifth. Next, they can perform what is considered a denial of service attack, or DOS, to make your network unusable by sending out false requests. And then also infect the network with malicious threats or malware. To kind of go over, a few things that we'll be talking about, a number of ways you can secure your network through changing default names. How many still have not changed the administrative name on their routers? You guys are killing me. Enabling MAC filtering, assigning static IP addresses, setting up a DMZ, port forwarding or mapping, port triggering, firewall settings, content filtering, and so on and so on that we'll be going over. So first, most basic thing, change your SSID and password from the default. I hate to break it to you, but when they see a default SSID, one, they know the network's open. Two, they know what kind of router you're using. So they know all the vulnerabilities of that router. They can also, if you haven't changed the settings, they can go in and do that for you, which can be no fun. So if you have accounts also attributed to it that are not needed, delete or disable old accounts. On your personal PCs, if you have a guest account, delete or disable that guest account. If you want to have an account for when people come over, if they need to check their email or do what have you, create another user, give it extremely limited privileges, and then that way only the people you want to have access will have access. All right, enabling MAC filtering. Yes, Julian.
Just a question regarding what you just said. I have tried on my MacBook. I have tried to delete that that guest account of my Mac, but it doesn't give me an option.
Doesn't give you an option. Can you disable it? There should be a way to do one or the other. Because I know some Microsoft ones don't allow you to delete the guest, but you can disable the guest.
It doesn't even let me like select it. Because I was trying to change a lot of things on my computer since we're getting into security.
As you're learning about stuff, like, wow, my stuff's wide open.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll look at that here in a little bit, and we'll see if we can find a way to delete or disable that on your network.
Okay, thank you.
So MAC filtering. As we all remember, every network device has a MAC address or unique identifier, has the 6 groups of 2 hexadecimal numbers separated by colons. What you can do, because that does not change, you can set up MAC filtering if you have a small number of devices that will be connecting to your network. You can get the MAC addresses for all of them, list them in your MAC filtering on your network, turn it on, and then only those devices will be allowed access. Unfortunately, as we stated before, MAC filtering is something that is very easy to bypass by somebody who knows how to set up virtual machines and things like that. So with regards to the CompTIA, that is considered a good security feature. With regards to real life, it is not, because it is very easy to bypass. So another one of those things where it's kind of separating CompTIA versus real life. All right. Now, another thing you can do, if you have a small enough one, if you have like 25, 30 people, I wouldn't recommend doing this, but if you have about, 4 to 10, you can also assign static IP addresses to your systems. So your network is small enough, you don't necessarily need a DHCP. You can issue IP addresses to each host. And because you have assigned it statically, you can then make certain which host is associated with the IP address, then use a filtering mechanism to filter, much like MAC filtering, it would be IP filtering to allow access to only those hosts. Again, this is something that can be spoofed, but the person needs to know a little bit more about computers in order to accomplish this. So yes, it is considered a security protocol. Spoofing is kind of where you're imitating something else. So if I went and bought a Southwestern style sweater and some white headphones and a wig and came in here and said I was Avery, I would be trying to spoof, his identity, or we could do this here real quick. There we go. All right. So that is spoofing. So essentially you're imitating someone else. All right, DMZ. I hope we all remembered that. The demilitarized zone, which is an area where you can place a public server for access by people you might not otherwise trust. So you put a light layer of security, then you would have your servers where that you would want the public to have access, and then you would have a heavier duty firewall to your interior networks. And so anything that you would like public facing access to, web servers, things of that nature, you would put that in the DMZ. Every time you go to Google and you're looking up, various like searches or something like that, or going to Amazon's web server, all that stuff, every time you're accessing that, you're accessing servers inside their DMZ. So we need to, you would need to set something like this up ahead of time to work on it. And essentially it is a piece of a network between two firewalls, essentially. All right. Port forwarding or port mapping. If you remember back when we were talking about network devices like security cameras and things like that, if you are security minded, you don't want your security cameras being handled by a third party. So if you're having to go out to a website to be able to see the security cameras inside your own house, you're kind of giving up that security to someone else. Meaning people who work for that company can monitor those things. If their security is ever breached, then they have access to your security cameras and stuff like that. Yes, exactly like Ring. So it is very entertaining that something that is touted as a device to offer greater security to you actually can be a security liability. And also Ring is trying to find ways to share your internet bandwidth with other people. That's a fun thing Amazon was working on. So what port forwarding does is if I set it up a PTZ camera, which is pan, tilt, zoom, inside my network, most of them would operate off of port 80. I do not want just anybody outside of my network to ping port 80 on my gateway and be able to have access to that camera. So I would set up what is considered a port forwarding. So I would pick a random port like port, 35,253. And when I ping that port, then it would trigger my router to forward the traffic once it hits that port to go directly to my camera. And I could do this with as many cameras as I like. And if I want to access those cameras from outside of my network, so I can set it up to where I can hit non-standard ports and have them forwarded to the proper devices inside my network. And that is port forwarding. So port triggering. Remember how we talked about file transfer protocol, FTP? What port is FTP? 20 and 21. I think we briefly mentioned why they use two ports. when I send information out on port 20, it tends to respond on port 21. It's an older protocol, especially back in the time when we would use simplex protocols or simplex transmission. So I send out on port 80, it responds on 21. Well, remember we talked about our firewalls, the conversation needs to initiate from inside, and when they respond to me, they should be responding on the same port that I communicate with them on. That's not always the case. So we would set up something called port triggering, which means if I respond with an FTP protocol communication with an outside server, it goes out on 20. And when it goes out on 20, that tells my router to trigger to open port 21 so that when it responds back on 21, my router is looking for that communication and lets it through. If I don't set up that port trigger, when it responds on 21, the firewall blocks it because I've shut down those ports. So that's what port triggering is. Port forwarding or port mapping is it's redirecting traffic when it comes from the outside in. Port triggering is when a communication goes out, it triggers the router to open up another port. So when a response comes back, it allows that communication to come through. All right. Firewall settings. All right. Most or all routers with wired and wireless settings have personal firewalls enabled and configured to protect each systems. And this is a software type firewall. The built-in firewall feature on routers kind of acts as a bit of a robust entry point. For the most part, they operate as a stateful firewall where they're paying attention to that communication. That's the kind of the default setting on it. You can get in and go to more advanced settings and set up a packet filtering firewall where it's going to pay attention to the conversation and the types of information going through. And that's where you'll set up your blacklists and whitelists. Interestingly enough, when Avery was a teacher, he had a lot of fun with this with his students.
Is that your segue for me to talk about it?
Yeah, you can talk about it if you want. You don't have to.
No, I like it. It was my favorite part about being a teacher. So I made use of technology a lot in my class, and at the school I was at, every learner had a laptop, and we connected it to this like central application. I forgot what it was called, but basically I was allowed, or I was able to block or allow whatever website I needed the learners to be on. So if I needed them to only be on one specific website, I could set it so that was the only thing that they could get on with their laptop. And if they finished early, I could set separate rules for the learners that finished early. So I could let them go on to like code.org or a typing application, whatever they wanted to do with that free time. And then I could also, regulate what they did for, like if we had inside recess, they wanted to be on their laptops, I could make sure that they were allowed to go on websites that we knew were okay for them to play on. But it's a good parental / teacher control.
Like LimeWire, that was always a wholesome one.
Yeah.
All right.
Schools that honestly, Stephen, most schools are going to some sort of laptop per student.
My wife teaches at Westside schools here in Jacksonville, and most of them are moving, like they are getting to the point where they have laptops for almost every kid. Because they use programs like iReady and stuff like that to actually deliver a lot of content, and it allows for certain subjects kids to kind of move at their own pace, which is kind of good because typically The more advanced students kind of get flounder because, you know, they pick up, they, you know, learn whatever's being taught in the classroom, and then they just kind of sit there. And then you have the bottom quartile, which struggle, and then the middle quartile, which is where they're mostly teaching to, but this allows them to kind of learn at their level. So kind of neat that they're implementing some of this stuff.
Yeah, and it's also really handy for learners that had to switch to completely online.
Yes.
When I was teaching, it was pre-COVID, and then COVID hit, and my class actually performed higher than like any of the other 5th grade classes, because my kids were so used to using the technology already. Like I already made use of Google Classroom, and I tried to get them familiar with it. So when we made that switch, they were better equipped.
And then he said, I never want to teach again, which is
Yep.
why we hired him.
Yeah, teaching's lame. Don't do it. It's not worth it. I'm just kidding. There are a lot of great things about teaching. And I'm very happy with my career choice.
Yeah, I've been a coach for 23 years. I mean, yeah, I just wish it did that.
Yep, exactly.
All right.
Totally.
Yep.
I was just I was segueing back to you.
I'm trying not to disturb my Rubik's Cube.
Don't do it.
I've done pretty good today.
It's not bad.
Yeah, and then my pyramid one, man, I'm almost done with that one.
You're doing 2 different puzzles
At the same
at the
time,
same
yes.
time?
Yeah.
What's wrong with you?
I did this one in like 5 minutes while we were opening this morning.
Nice.
All right. But I'm trying not to fidget with it when I teach. So moving on to content filtering and parental controls. If you have children, it's a necessity. If you have other people in your house that are not as technologically literate, it's entertainment. Because you can set parental controls on whatever devices you so choose, and you can do things by filtering by particular types of content. This is also really nice in the workplace. You don't want necessarily people going to Spotify and chewing up the bandwidth of the company, listening to music, or going to Amazon and shopping for, you know, all kinds of neat little knickknacks like giant wall watches or things like that. You don't want them going to gambling sites or sailing the high seas looking for movies or that kind of fun stuff. So you can content filter for that, or use specifically parental controls, which kind of looks at the ratings of the websites you're visiting. Like if you go to YouTube or something like that, there's a whole host of videos you will not be allowed to see because of parental controls, things of that nature. So that is another way to kind of add security, kind of keeps, you know, whoever's using your network in pocket, not letting them, you know, go to sites you would prefer them not going to, which would be higher risk for your network. All right. Did I tell you guys about what a watering hole attack was? No? All right. I'll talk about that one in a little bit. All right. Disabling ports. Like we talked about quite a few times, there are 65,000 ports on your computer. We don't necessarily need all of them available. And if you're at the house and you're not hosting a web server, you don't necessarily need port 80 open. So you don't need people having access to come in as if they're trying to connect to a web server if you're not hosting a web service. So like Mark mentioned earlier this morning, you would do something that was called system hardening, where you would go in and essentially find all the ports that are not necessarily needed and shut those ports down. Yes, William.
would that be something like, would that be the same thing as port triggering?
Well, this is something you would do before you would set up port triggering.
Okay.
So you would shut down all the open ports, but allow only specific ones to be open.
Okay.
But port triggering can also be set up as kind of a way to hide things to where people don't have really quick, easy access to it. But typically you would do port, disabling your ports before you would set up port triggering and things of that nature. And a way to verify whether or not those ports were shut down is you can do a port scan on your own network, like from the outside, which it would ping all available ports, and it would basically give you a list of all ports that are open. And you can use that to verify that you've shut down every port that you need to shut down.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And they do like asking the question, say, Sally works for computer company Z, and she's able to send emails, but not receive emails. And what should Sally do? And then basically what they're trying to get you to do is go to the firewall or what have you and open up that port for your email. And you have to know the correct port for the email. So, all right, update your firmware. From time to time, they do update the UEFI, stuff like that. You do on a kind of regular basis want to go in and check and see if any updates have been made, because there may have been a case where they discovered a vulnerability or upgraded your security or things like that. And you want to make sure that you keep that stuff up to date, because if attackers come and try to exploit that, you want to be prepared for it. And all too often, hackers look at the things that are being sent out, the patches, the repairs that are being sent out, security updates, because that gives them a good clue as to how they can breach networks or get into computers. So they kind of reverse engineer what it is they're trying to fix and hope they can catch people before they do these updates. All right, next we will talk about physical security. Like we mentioned earlier this morning, we talked about the man traps, locks on doors, the various types of different physical security we can put in place in order to protect our systems. And we've said it before, we'll say it again. If somebody has physical access to your systems, they own your systems. So we want to prevent that from happening. And unfortunately, every office job I've ever held in multiple cities and multiple locations, they always have the door to the server room wide open. I have never understood that. I'm guessing they never got, had a bad cybersecurity attack at where I've worked. I don't know, but it was just something I've noticed everywhere I've worked. The server room has always been wide open. Don't do that.
But if they have a bad cooling system and they need the air to cool
that's usually the problem. But again, that is a problem that needs to be addressed, not let's ignore it and just leave our systems wide open. So the other one is humidity levels and things like that. Who was talking?
Yeah, Joseph, I'm just trying to be a devil advocate. Okay. Maybe they feel that a place is not too sensitive when it comes to insecurity. Probably people around are not so sophisticated to,
Yeah, I mean, and that's possible. It may just not be worth the effort to try to protect those systems, I guess. Although the one building I worked at, and I kid you not, the building was wide open. I could get into the server rooms, into our office, but they had a keypad lock on the bathroom. So of all the things they were going to put any security on, they put it on the bathroom, not on anything else. So it was just kind of weird. But
toilet paper is expensive, Kelly.
Well, it is now, but it wasn't then.
and you can't have them employees taking too many bathroom breaks. You know how that is.
Everybody gets their own personal code and it logs it every time you go.
And how long you stay in there too.
Yeah, hey, I've had coworkers that abuse it. I had one lady, she would show up, clock in, go to the bathroom. We wouldn't see her for like 2 hours. She'd come back, do like 30 minutes of work, go to lunch. All right. So physical security, always be sure to pay attention to that. It is something that is often neglected by IT professionals because they tend to be too super focused on the internal workings or the, system itself. All right, so continuing on, various ways we can work on protecting our wireless SOHO routers. Change the default SSID. Instead of it being like Linksys 523, change it to, whatever you want your network to be. You can be really creative. You can be funny. You can be just like Jacksonville office or whatever, but just make sure it gets changed. And then you can set the encryption level. If you want to just kind of have hackers kind of smirk at it a little bit, you can put WEP in place. They can come in and look at your network and be like, oh, it's cute. And, bypass it really quick. Otherwise, you can put in WPA, which is a little bit better, or WPA2, which is significantly better. So you always should use some form of encryption on your wireless networks. That way, everything is not transmitted in what is considered plain text. So next, yet another thing that is considered to be a security method, which is disabling the SSID broadcast, which basically just means it's not blasting the name of your network out everywhere. This is considered to be a security method, but anybody with a wireless scanner can find it pretty easily, and you can download free wireless scanners, I believe, on your cell phone. So they have applications where you can have it too. So you can find networks pretty easily, even if they do disable this SSID broadcast. But for the purposes of A+, that is considered a security technique. Now, these settings would be changed in your router itself, DW. So when you would log into your router, say if you had a Xfinity router, you would go into your Google browser and type in 10.0.0.1, and it would take you to your router. And then you could log in to your router with the sign in and password, which I hope you have changed from the default that it has. If you have not, it is likely admin, lowercase, and then PASSWD. That's your password. If you didn't know it, now you do. And then you can sign into your router and change the sign in password if you have not, and do all of these settings from that point. So
the router on IP config would be that'd be the default gateway, or
no, not an IP config. You would actually go online and log into your router for your house, like the building, the office, which would be your gateway. Like if you go to your IP config, that gateway, yes. If that's what you're talking about, your gateway.
Yeah,
yes.
That's what I meant. Yes.
Yes. That is the IP for your router. And you could just type that in to your URL in a web browser, and it'll take you right there. And then you can log into your router. Learning how to bypass these encryptions is a little bit beyond the scope of this course, Stephen. We're just at this point kind of teaching you how, although, who was it, Rienzi at the last cohort? Avery kept finding free security courses, and she was on it so fast, like less than 30 minutes of him posting. She's like, I've already signed up, and then he was, there was a course on the dark web. There was a course on security, all that stuff. She was instantly going after those courses.
Yeah, she loves them. She's doing the generation security one.
Oh, Security Plus.
Mhm.
I didn't know Generation did Security Plus.
I don't know if it's security plus or just like a different security course, but
Okay.
they just started it.
Okay, that's cool. Well, she's still got to finish her 1002.
Yeah, I know. I've been talking to her about it. I'm making sure she's working towards it.
Yeah. Get on Alan's case too.
Yeah.
All right. WPS Wi-Fi protected setup. Please disable this. Go into your router, turn this off. This is a fully cracked protocol. And they don't even need to initiate it by pushing the button. They can initiate it remotely and access your systems if you have WPS protocols up. Please, please turn these off. However, they say it's protected by a 8 to 10 digit pin. That pin is usually on the bottom of the device. So again, if they have physical access to your devices, they basically own them because they can get the information they need to be able to access it. But so more sophisticated hackers don't even need that. They can bypass that security on WPS. So it's just better to turn it off. And you can do that in the settings of your router. Although Marvin would talk for an hour about what a wonderful and convenient feature it is. All right. Antenna and access point placement. One of the things that people don't necessarily think of with regards to antennas and wireless access points is they go beyond your walls. So if you have your router or antenna backed up to a wall to the outside of your house or the outside of your building, that means people outside of your building have an opportunity to gain access to it. So one way you can kind of work around this, you can actually turn down the power of the antenna to diminish the sphere it has so that the signal does not go beyond your walls. That is a security feature and one you need to be aware of. You don't need all your antennas at maximum power. You want to make sure the signals do not exceed your walls as much as possible, because there is something called war driving, which is where people drive around and look for hackable wireless protocols. It is kind of more of a 90s, early 2000s thing, but it's still, does happen from time to time. And then there's the other side of that coin, which is called war chalking, which is where when hackers discover an open network, they'll write the SSID and password on chalk on the sidewalks so people passing by will be able to access it if they want to. So turn your signals down so they do not exceed, the walls of your office. Questions? We should show a demo. I think there is I think Mike Myers has a quick demo on it, doesn't he?
I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm sure
Does
we can
Dion-
find something.
Yeah, does Dion have one?
I don't know.
What?
I'll look into it.
Although while we're here and talking, before, when we break, everybody run IP config on your own computer, find out what your gateway is, log into your router, change the name and password, and then you can look around at the settings that we just talked about here.
I have a question.
Yes.
So on WPS, will they have, all devices will have it, all routers will have WPS?
Not all devices will have it. Many devices will. Printers, especially a lot of routers have the WPS. But it's one of those things, whenever you have network devices that have this, you should go into the settings and turn it off because it is more of a security risk.
So the same as for the TV and all?
I don't think
I've seen it
TV,
wrong.
I don't think TVs
Like,
typically have a
I've
W,
seen the sign, but you have to enter your code to access.
which basically is what you're using. You're using WPS to log your TV into your network.
Right,
So you're using the WPS of your router for the TV to access it.
in the past.
Yeah, that's what that is. It's not the WPS on the TV. So it's not you gaining access to the TV, it's the TV gaining access to your network.
To the router. So how do you supposed to turn it off?
Not on the TV, you wouldn't need to, but in your router, you would.
Right.
So
Okay.
if you want to turn it on just long enough to get a device linked to your network and then turn it back off, that's fine.
I
Because
see.
I get that it's easy and it's convenient,
Yes.
but as a general rule, you do not want that activated or turned on at all times.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Kelly, I'm sorry. Could you reload the link so I can get the participation count?
Breaks my heart. People learn it all the time.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
There you go. I'm sitting there thinking, Avery, with a screwdriver and a hammer, I can do this Rubik's Cube a lot faster.
Yeah, that's easy mode.
We talked about ARP and networking. Technical session. Give about another 30 seconds.
Kelly, you know that yawning is contagious, right?
That was why after you yawned, I did.
Our weather has been kind of funny here lately, hasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like 85, 50.
Yeah.
You're like
Sleep-
70, 82.
Sleep with
40.
the doors and the windows open at night and turn on the AC in the daytime.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Y'all keep playing with us and we gonna block y'all.
Yeah, try 60 to 20. That's what we're dealing with.
Well, yeah. It's just that up and down weather that just gets everybody sick. It's no fun.
Yeah, we've not had much of a winter in Florida.
It's supposed to get more like winter after next week, though, Karen.
Mm.
It's supposed to get like significantly cooler, like in the 50s and low 60s, and kind of stay there for a little while. In theory.
So I have to put socks on with my flip flops then.
Yeah,
huh?
you gotta break out the Florida winter gear.
Yeah.
Life is so tough, you guys, really.
Hey, that's why I say check back with us on summertime when it's 110 with a 200% humidity. And it's
Exactly.
just so miserable you don't even want to go outside.
Kelly,
you
that's why
walk-
that's why my brothers live there and I never will.
Yeah.
When you walk around with ice trays for slippers.
Pretty much.
Come.
All right, let's take a look at it real quick. All right, which of these would be the most likely reason for configuring a port trigger on a SOHO router? So private access on your network, you need to prioritize voice traffic over file transfers. Port trigger, okay. Encrypt network communication across a wireless network. And that kind of leads into the when one device communicates, it opens up the port for the other one to communicate back. So we'll probably need to go into that one a little bit more. We'll talk about that one a little bit more. Which of the following usually incorporates an 8-digit code? WPS. Turn it off. Please, for the love of everything, turn it off. Three, in a SOHO wireless network, what prevents unauthorized users from accessing confidential data? That would be your setting encryption. And lastly, you're configuring a SOHO wireless network for a client. The client wants only 5 authorized computers to connect to the network within a defined IP range. What should you configure on the router? Select the 2 best answers of your address resolution protocol and your MAC filtering. All right. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints? How many people no longer look at the free Wi-Fi at restaurants and other places the same anymore?
Kelly, every time I see free, I say, oh, you're the product. Every
you go.
time I see
Every time.
free, I tell them, I hope you know you're the product. And everybody's like, where are you